thought I was safe. I thought my prayers, my devotion, and my good deeds guaranteed me paradise. But when I died, I didn't see paradise. I saw fire. I heard screams, thousands of them, maybe millions. I saw faces twisted in agony, chained to pillars of flame. And then I saw him, the figure I thought would save me. But instead of welcoming me, he mocked me. "You believed the lie," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You led others to follow it. And now, this is your reward." That's when the ground cracked open beneath me, and I began to fall, to a place I wouldn't wish on anyone. But just as I thought it was over, a light appeared. And that light, it changed everything. Stay with me, because what I saw next will shatter everything you think you know about life, death, and eternity.
Before we begin, let me ask you something. What if everything you believe about life after death is wrong? What if one moment could change your eternity? Today, you'll hear a testimony so powerful, so shocking, it will leave you questioning everything. If this message resonates with you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss content that could change your life. And as you watch, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Maybe even share a prayer for those seeking the truth.
My name is Leyla Hassan. I never thought I'd be sitting here telling this story. I was a woman who thought she had everything figured out. Faith, family, purpose, it was all so clear, or so I thought. But what I experienced the day I died has changed everything. I want you to listen closely to what I'm about to share, because it's not just my story, it's a warning. If you think you have time to figure things out later, to fix things tomorrow, or to keep living as if nothing matters, then you need to keep watching. What happened to me might happen to anyone, and the truth I saw will leave you questioning everything you've ever believed. Let me start from the beginning so you can understand who I was before this happened. I was born into a loving family in Cairo, Egypt. My parents raised me with strong values and unwavering faith. I grew up hearing the call to prayer echo through our streets 5 times a day. As a child, I'd watch my father kneel on his prayer mat, eyes closed, whispering the verses of the Quran with such devotion that it made me want to be just like him. By the time I was 25, I had graduated from university and moved to Dubai, where I worked as an interior designer. Life felt full. I was married to my childhood sweetheart, Omar, and we had 2 young sons who were the light of my world. My days were busy but predictable. Prayers, work, family dinners, and moments of quiet reflection. For anyone looking in, my life seemed perfect. I was devout, disciplined, and happy. I worked hard and followed the teachings I had been raised with to the letter. My husband and I ran a small family business, and we spent our weekends taking the boys to the park or visiting relatives. I thought I was doing everything right. I prayed the right prayers. I gave to charity. I fasted during Ramadan. I believed in the words I had been taught since I was a child. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. It was an ordinary day, like any other. I remember waking up early, getting my boys ready for school and packing their lunches. I kissed Omar goodbye as he left for work. My plan for the day was simple: meet a client, finalize some designs, and then take a short break by the beach. I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. You see, we all have this sense of security, like nothing bad could ever touch us. We think we have control over our lives. I thought the same thing, until the moment I found myself slipping into the unknown. One moment I was driving along a familiar road, humming to the radio. The next, my car swerved to avoid a truck. I remember the screeching tires, the sound of shattering glass, and the violent jolt as my car spun out of control. And then, silence. But this wasn't the kind of silence you might imagine. It was heavy, like the weight of the entire world pressing down on me. I wasn't in my car anymore. I wasn't even in my body. At first, I thought I was dreaming. I could see myself lying there in the wreckage, motionless, blood pooling around my head. People were shouting, rushing to help, but I couldn't reach them. It felt like I was trapped, floating in a strange, cold space. And then I was pulled away, quickly, forcefully, into something darker than anything I had ever known. If you're still watching, good, because what I'm about to tell you will shake you to your core. This wasn't just an accident. It wasn't just a brush with death. It was something else entirely. Something I wasn't ready for. I wish I could tell you it was peaceful. I wish I could say it was like drifting into a warm, endless sleep. But it wasn't. This was something terrifying. It felt like being swallowed by a storm. The air grew thick, the light faded, and I was surrounded by shadows that whispered things I couldn't understand. I don't know how long I was in that place, seconds, hours. Time didn't exist there. And then I saw it, a faint glow in the distance. At first, I thought it was hope, a way out. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't light at all. It was fire. I'll never forget what I saw next. But before I tell you, I need to take you back to who I was before this happened. To the life I built and the beliefs I held so tightly, because that's the only way you'll understand the weight of what I'm about to share. Stay with me. What comes next will change everything. Life before the NDE, a devout believer. If you met me before that day, you would have thought I had everything figured out. I was that person who always seemed to have an answer for everything. You know the type, calm, confident, secure. I believed my faith was my anchor, my foundation, and my guide. Every decision I made was rooted in the teachings I'd grown up with. I wasn't just a Muslim in name. I lived it. Every prayer, every fast, every act of charity, I did it with a sense of purpose. Looking back now, I can see how deeply I trusted in all of it. I was so sure I was on the right path, so sure that I was doing what mattered most. Let me tell you what a day in my life looked like. Maybe it will help you understand the person I was. I woke up before the sun every morning for Fajr prayer. The world was still dark and quiet, and those moments felt like the most sacred part of my day. I would lay out my prayer mat, close my eyes, and recite verses I had memorized since childhood. The rhythm of the words felt like a connection to something greater, something eternal. Afterward, I would make breakfast for my boys, pack their lunches, and kiss them goodbye before they went off to school. Then it was time for work. My job as an interior designer wasn't just about making spaces look nice. It felt like a way to bring order and beauty into a chaotic world. I loved it. I really did. I loved creating something that made people smile, that gave them comfort in their own homes. And when I wasn't working, I was at the mosque, helping with community events or teaching Quranic studies to young girls. If you had asked me back then, I would have told you my life was full. I had everything I wanted, a family that loved me, a job I was proud of, a faith that gave me purpose. But here's the thing. Sometimes, even when everything looks perfect on the outside, there's something you can't see. Have you ever felt so sure about something that you never even stopped to question it? That was me. I never asked myself why I believed what I believed. I never wondered if there could be something I was missing. Why would I? Everything felt right, but there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when doubt crept in, like whispers in the back of my mind. I remember one day, my youngest son, Kareem, came home from school with a question. He said, "Mama, how do we know that what we believe is true?" I laughed and told him what I'd always been taught. Because it's written in the Quran, Kareem. It's the final revelation. There's nothing more to question. He nodded and went back to his homework. But that question stayed with me. Not because I didn't know the answer. I thought I did. But because of how certain he sounded when he asked it. Another time, my best friend Amina told me about a dream she'd had. In the dream, she said she saw a man in white with hands that glowed like fire. She didn't know who he was, but he told her, "You're searching in the wrong place." I brushed it off. Dreams are just dreams, I told her. But part of me wondered, why would she see that? Why now? I didn't let those moments linger. I pushed them aside, buried them under prayers and routines. But looking back, I think they were warnings. Warnings I ignored. Now, here's where things get hard for me to talk about. Because the person I was back then, she had no idea what was coming. Do you know what it's like to feel completely in control, only to have it ripped away in an instant? I didn't. Not yet. But that's exactly what was about to happen. That morning was just like any other. I said my prayers, kissed my boys goodbye, and left the house feeling confident and prepared for the day ahead. I had a meeting with a client, then planned to take a quiet walk by the beach to clear my head. It was so normal, so routine, that I didn't even think about it. But then, as I drove down that familiar road, everything changed. I saw the truck too late. The sound of tires screeching, the jolt of metal hitting metal, It all happened so fast, and then, in a single moment, everything went still. But this wasn't the kind of stillness you might expect. This wasn't peace. This was the beginning of something I could never have prepared for. I wasn't in control anymore, and where I was about to go, control didn't exist. Stay with me. What happened next will make you rethink everything you think you know about life, death, and what comes after. The accident, death unveiled. I can still hear the sound, that horrible grinding noise of metal twisting and shattering, the tires screeching as I tried to swerve away from the truck barreling toward me. It happened so fast, too fast. One moment, I was gripping the wheel, heart racing, praying under my breath that I could avoid it. The next, I was weightless, as if gravity itself had let go of me. When the impact came, it was like being punched by the world itself. My car spun out of control, flipping over, glass shattering everywhere. And then, silence. But it wasn't over. I remember thinking, am I alive? My body felt distant, like it wasn't mine anymore. I could see the wreckage around me, the twisted metal, the blood pooling beneath me. People were running toward my car, shouting, their faces pale with panic. I wanted to call out, to say, I'm here, help me. But no sound came. That's when I realized I wasn't in my body anymore. It's hard to explain what it felt like. Imagine standing in the middle of chaos, but none of it touches you. I was there, but I wasn't. I was watching everything happen from somewhere, above it all. And then it happened. Something pulled me. Not gently, not like a warm hand guiding me, but like a force I couldn't resist. It was cold and unrelenting, and it dragged me away from the wreckage, away from the people trying to save me. I thought I was falling, but there was no ground beneath me, only darkness. Thick, suffocating darkness that felt alive. I started to panic. I thought, is this death? Is this what happens when we die? I always believed I knew the answer. My whole life, I was taught that if I lived right, if I prayed, fasted, gave to charity, then death would be peaceful. I would be welcomed into paradise. But this wasn't paradise. This was something else. The darkness felt endless, like it was swallowing me whole. And then I heard it. A sound so faint at first that I wasn't sure it was real. A whisper. No, not a whisper. Many whispers. They were calling my name, but not like a friend calling you from across the street. This was different. The voices were sharp, cruel, and they seemed to come from everywhere at once. Leyla. It sent chills through me. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness wrapped around me like a vice, holding me in place. And then the whispers turned into something worse. Screams. The kind of screams that don't just pierce your ears, they pierce your soul. It was the sound of pain, of despair so deep it felt like it could crush you. I wanted to cover my ears, but I didn't have ears to cover. I wasn't in my body anymore. I was something else. And then I saw it. Far in the distance, a light began to flicker. At first, I thought it was hope. I thought, finally, someone is coming to save me. But as the light grew brighter, I realized I was wrong. It wasn't a comforting glow. It was fire. Flames stretched out as far as I could see, licking at the edges of the darkness. The air grew thick and heavy, choking me, even though I didn't have lungs anymore. And in the middle of the fire, I saw something, or someone. At first, I couldn't make it out. It looked like a man, standing tall and still, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a man. It was wrong. The figure turned to face me, and my heart, or whatever was left of it, felt like it stopped. His eyes were hollow, dark pits that seemed to suck in the light around him. His face was twisted, cruel, and familiar in a way that made my stomach turn. He stepped closer, and I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. "Welcome," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. And then I realized who I was looking at. But that's where I need to stop for now, because before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand something else. You need to know where I went after that. Because what came next wasn't just terrifying, it was something I'll never forget. Stay with me. I'll take you there. The transition, entering the afterlife. I wish I could tell you that the worst part was over, that I had woken up from this nightmare, shaken but alive. But I hadn't. What came next was something I can barely describe, even now. The fire, the figure, the whispers, they all seemed to melt away, but not in a way that gave me relief. It was more like they were being pulled back into the shadows, waiting for their moment to return. And I was falling again. This wasn't like the fall from my accident. There was no air rushing past me, no ground to brace for. It was endless, like being dragged through a void with no beginning and no end. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel everything. Do you know what it feels like to lose all sense of time? To have no idea how long you've been somewhere or when it will stop? It's terrifying. Then, suddenly, I stopped falling, but I wasn't standing. I wasn't lying down. I wasn't anything. I felt suspended, as though I were caught in a strange in-between place. The darkness around me wasn't empty anymore. It was alive. It pressed against me, heavy and cold, like it wanted to suffocate whatever was left of me. And then, out of nowhere, a sound broke through the silence. It wasn't like the whispers I had heard before. This was louder, stronger, like the tolling of a bell far away. At first, I thought it was coming to save me. But as the sound grew closer, I realized it wasn't a rescue. It was a summons. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't resist it. Whatever was pulling me, it had complete control. I remember thinking, what's next? Is this the end? And that's when I saw it. At first, it looked like a small point of light in the distance. I wanted to believe it was hope, a way out of this endless void. I thought maybe this is the moment where everything changes. But the closer I got, the more I realized that this wasn't hope. The light was red. It flickered and grew brighter with every second until it wasn't a single light anymore. It was an entire landscape. And then I smelled it. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur, burning flesh, and something else. Something rotten. Something that made me feel like my soul was being poisoned. I wanted to turn back, but there was no way to stop. The darkness around me seemed to peel away like a curtain being pulled back to reveal a stage. And what I saw, I'll never forget it. The ground stretched endlessly in every direction, cracked and blackened like cooling lava. Fire erupted in bursts, lighting up the horizon. And the screams were everywhere. Have you ever heard someone scream in pure terror? Not out of fear of something small, but out of the deepest, most unbearable pain? That's what it sounded like, but multiplied by thousands. It felt like those screams weren't just around me. They were inside me, echoing through every part of my being. I wanted to cover my ears, but I had no ears. I wanted to close my eyes, but I had no eyes. I could only watch and listen as the reality of where I was began to sink in. I thought, this can't be real. This isn't happening. I don't belong here. But something inside me knew the truth. And then I saw them. Figures moving in the distance. At first, they looked like shadows, but as they came closer, I realized they were people. They weren't walking. They were stumbling, crawling, dragging themselves across the ground as if every step was agony. Their faces were twisted in pain, their mouths open in silent cries for help. I tried to call out to them, to ask what was happening, but no sound came. And then I felt it. A presence. Something was behind me, watching me, waiting for me to turn around. My entire being was filled with dread. Whatever it was, I didn't want to see it. But I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I turned, and that's when I saw him. The same figure from the fire. He stood tall, his face cloaked in shadow. His eyes, if you could call them that, were empty pits that seemed to draw in all the light around him. He smiled at me, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was the kind of smile that tells you someone enjoys your suffering. "Welcome," he said, his voice like nails scraping against metal. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. And then he said something I'll never forget. "You thought you knew the truth. You thought your prayers would save you. But you never asked the right questions. You never searched for the real answer." Before I could respond, before I could even think, the ground beneath me cracked, and I began to fall again. But this time, I knew where I was going, and it wasn't paradise. Stay with me. You need to know what I saw next, because if you think this is the worst it gets, you're wrong. The horror of hell. I thought I had already seen the worst. The fire, the figure, the screams. I didn't think anything could be more terrifying. But I was wrong. What came next was so much worse. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it. I was falling again, but this time I wasn't alone. All around me were other souls, tumbling through the darkness. Their faces twisted in terror, their hands reaching out as if they could grab hold of something, anything, to stop the fall. I could hear their cries, their desperate pleas. "Please, help me. I didn't know." And yet no one answered. The fall ended as suddenly as it began. I hit the ground, or what I thought was the ground, with a force that should have shattered me. But there was no body to break. I was whole and yet not. The ground beneath me was like cracked stone, glowing faintly with an orange-red light that seemed to come from somewhere deep below. Heat rose from it in waves, burning my very being, but I couldn't move. I looked up and saw a sky that wasn't a sky. It was thick, swirling smoke that seemed alive, twisting and curling like it had a mind of its own. The air was suffocating, thick with the smell of sulfur and something even worse, something rotten and decayed. And then I heard it, the screams. Not just a few, not even hundreds, thousands, maybe millions. It was a sound that came from every direction, a chorus of agony that seemed to stretch forever. I forced myself to look around. That's when I saw them, the people. They were everywhere, scattered across this horrible landscape. Some were crawling, their bodies writhing in pain. Others were chained to pillars of fire that erupted from the ground, their faces frozen in expressions of pure torment. And there were those who were standing still, their heads hanging low, as if they had already given up. I wanted to call out to them, to ask what this place was, but I couldn't. My voice was gone, swallowed by the horror around me. And then I saw him again, the figure. He stood on a rise in the distance, looking out over the sea of suffering souls. He was taller now, his form darker, more terrifying than before. His eyes glowed like embers, and his smile was wide, cruel, and full of satisfaction. I felt myself being drawn toward him, not because I wanted to go, but because I had no choice. "You thought you were safe," he said as I got closer. His voice was smooth now, mocking, like he enjoyed watching me struggle to understand. I tried to speak, to ask him what this place was, but before I could, he raised his hand, and the ground beneath me began to change. I saw images, scenes from my life. Every lie I had told, every selfish decision, every time I had ignored the doubts in my heart, the moments when I could have searched for the truth but didn't. And then I saw the people I had taught, the children I had guided, the friends I had assured that our way was the right way. Their faces stared back at me, full of pain and betrayal. "Do you see now?" the figure said, stepping closer. "Do you understand?" I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know. I wanted to scream. I thought I was doing the right thing. But he laughed, a deep, hollow sound that echoed across the wasteland. "You were given chances," he said, his voice like thunder. "But you chose comfort over truth, pride over humility. You followed a lie, and now you'll face the consequences." The ground cracked beneath me, and I saw flames rising up. In them, I could see faces, hands reaching out, their screams piercing through everything. And then he leaned in close, his face inches from mine. "Welcome to your reality," he said, "the reality you chose." I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything to escape, but I was frozen, paralyzed by fear and the weight of my own guilt. And then, just as the flames began to rise around me, I felt something. It wasn't the heat of the fire or the pull of the darkness. It was something else. It was light. And for the first time, I felt hope. But it wasn't just hope. It was power. It was love. And it was coming for me. Stay with me, because what happened next was something I never expected. Something that changed everything. The light of hope, meeting the true savior. I thought it was over. The flames were rising, the screams were closing in, and that figure, whatever it was, stood there, grinning like it owned me. I had no fight left. I felt crushed under the weight of my mistakes, my choices, and the lies I had believed. But then it happened. At first, it was just a faint glow, far off in the distance. It didn't look like the fire around me. This was softer, pure, and steady. It was so small, I almost didn't notice it. But the moment I saw it, I felt something shift. The heat, the darkness, the weight, they didn't disappear, but they started to pull back like shadows retreating from the light. The figure turned too, and for the first time I saw something in it that I didn't expect. Fear. The glow grew brighter, cutting through the smoke and flames until it filled the entire space. It wasn't just light, it was something more, something alive. And then, out of the light, I saw him. I don't even know how to describe what I saw. He didn't look like the paintings or statues I'd seen before. He wasn't what I expected at all. But every part of me, every broken, desperate part of me, knew exactly who he was. This was him, the one I had ignored my entire life, the one I had dismissed, argued against, and refused to believe in. And he was here, standing in front of me. He didn't say a word at first. He didn't have to. His presence was enough. It was overwhelming, like standing in the middle of a storm and feeling completely safe at the same time. I fell to my knees. I couldn't look at him, not because he told me not to, but because I was so aware of who I was compared to him. All the lies I'd told, the things I'd done, the people I'd misled, it all felt so small and dirty in the face of who he was. I thought he would condemn me. I thought he would tell me I was too far gone, that there was nothing left for me. But instead, he knelt down. He knelt down in front of me, reached out his hand, and touched my shoulder. And in that moment, everything changed. The fire was gone, the screams were gone, the darkness was gone. It was just him and me, standing in a light so pure, it felt like it was washing over my soul. "My child," he said, and his voice wasn't angry or harsh. It was filled with a love so deep, it felt like it was holding me together. "You have seen the truth," he said. "Now, what will you do with it?" I couldn't hold back anymore. I started crying, shaking, overwhelmed by everything I had done wrong. "I'm sorry," I said, over and over again. "I was wrong. I was so wrong." He smiled, a smile so full of mercy, it broke me. "Yes," he said, "but it's not too late for you. I brought you here so you would see, so you would know, and now I'm sending you back." His words hit me like a wave. "Back? Back to what?" "I don't deserve to go back," I said, shaking my head. "I've done so much harm. I've led others away from you. How could I possibly make it right?" "You can't," he said, his voice firm but gentle, "but I can, and I will through you." In that moment, I realized what he meant. He wasn't giving me a second chance because I deserved it. He was giving me a second chance so I could warn others, so I could tell them what I had seen. But before I could say anything else, he looked into my eyes, and I felt something I will never forget. It wasn't just his power or his love. It was his sorrow. He wasn't just sad for me. He was sad for everyone. "So many are lost," he said, his voice filled with pain. "So many have chosen the darkness, but you can help them see the light." I wanted to promise him everything. I wanted to say I would never fail again, never doubt, never stray. But he stopped me. "This isn't about perfection," he said. "It's about surrender. Trust me, and I will guide you." And then he reached out his hand again, and this time he touched my forehead. The light grew brighter, so bright I couldn't see anything else. It surrounded me, filled me, and for a moment I felt complete peace. But then I heard his voice one last time, soft but clear. "You're going back. Tell them. Warn them. I will be with you." And just like that, the light began to fade, and I felt myself being pulled again. This time, back toward the world I thought I had left behind. Stay with me, because what happened when I returned will show you how real this all is. I thought meeting him was the end, but it was only the beginning. The journey back, a second chance. When the light began to fade, I felt it immediately. The weight of my body. It was like being forced into a space that was too small, too tight. The peace I had felt just moments before was replaced by pain. Intense, burning pain that coursed through every part of me. I could hear sounds, machines beeping, voices shouting, and a faint hum of activity around me. I wanted to open my eyes, but it felt like they were glued shut. My chest ached with every breath, and my head throbbed as if it had been split open. And then I heard a voice. "She's waking up." It was faint at first, like it was coming from far away. But as the seconds passed, it grew clearer. I wasn't in that horrible place anymore. I wasn't in the light either. I was back. The realization hit me like a wave. I was alive. But as relief started to settle in, something else rose in its place. Fear. I had seen things I couldn't unsee. Things that weren't just meant for me to know, but for me to tell. And yet the thought of telling anyone filled me with dread. How do you explain something like that? How do you tell people that everything they believe, everything they trust could be wrong? For days, I couldn't speak. The doctors said it was because of the breathing tube they'd used to keep me alive. But I knew the truth. I wasn't ready. I spent those days lying in that hospital bed, replaying everything I had seen. The fire, the screams, the light, his voice. It felt so vivid, so real, like it had just happened moments ago. My family came to visit, their faces filled with worry and relief. My husband, Omar, sat beside me every day, holding my hand and whispering prayers in Arabic. He didn't know that every word he spoke reminded me of what I had seen and the weight of what I now carried. "You're so strong, Leyla," he said one day, his voice cracking. Allah has spared you for a reason. I wanted to tell him the truth right then. I wanted to scream, no, it wasn't Allah. It was him, the one we've been taught to reject. But I stayed silent. Not because I didn't want to tell him, but because I didn't know how. How do you look at someone you love and tell them their faith is a lie? I spent nights staring at the ceiling, praying, not the way I used to, but to the one who had sent me back. What do I say? How do I begin? Will they even listen? The answers didn't come right away, but slowly I began to feel something, a quiet reassurance, a presence. It was him, reminding me that I wasn't alone. And then one night, I had a dream. I saw myself standing in front of a crowd of people I knew, people I loved. They were angry, confused, some of them even crying. And I was speaking, telling them everything I had seen. I woke up in tears, my chest heavy with the weight of what I knew I had to do. The next morning, I asked for a pen and paper. My hands were shaky, my body weak, but I started to write everything down, every detail, every moment. It was like the words were pouring out of me, too fast to keep up with. By the time I finished, my hands were cramping, but I felt lighter. I knew then that this wasn't just a story to keep to myself, it was a message. But sharing it wouldn't be easy. I thought back to what he had told me before I returned. They won't all listen, but some will. Tell them anyway. Those words stayed with me as I prepared to tell my family. I didn't know how they would react. Would they believe me? Would they reject me? Would they think I had lost my mind? The fear was overwhelming, but the memory of what I had seen, the flames, the screams, the faces of the lost, was stronger. I couldn't stay silent, and so I waited for the right moment. One evening, Omar was sitting by my bed, our two boys playing quietly in the corner. The sun was setting, and the room was bathed in a soft orange light. I need to tell you something, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. What is it, Leyla? My heart pounded as I took a deep breath. When I was gone, I saw something I need you to hear. And with that, I began to tell him everything. Stay with me, because what happened next will show you how powerful the truth can be. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about breaking the chains that had held us for so long. The testimony breaking the chains. I will never forget the way Omar looked at me as I spoke. His face went from concern to confusion, then to disbelief. But I kept going. I had to. I told him everything, every detail of what I saw, what I felt, and what I heard. The fire, the screams, the figure who mocked me, the faces of the lost, the chains they couldn't escape. And then, the light. I told him about him, about the one who came for me, the one who saved me. At first, Omar sat in stunned silence. Then he shook his head and said, Leyla, you were unconscious. This was just a dream. Maybe it's the medication or the trauma from the accident. His words stung, but they didn't stop me. Omar, I said, you know me. You know I wouldn't make this up. What I saw wasn't a dream. It was real. He got up from his chair, pacing the room. Do you realize what you're saying? You're telling me everything we've believed, everything we've taught our children is a lie. I could see the anger building in him, but underneath it, there was something else. Fear. Yes, I said softly, my voice shaking, because I saw the truth. And if I don't tell you, if I stay silent, then what happens to you? What happens to the boys? What happens to all of us? For a moment, the room was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the machines around me. Then he turned to me, his voice cold. You're confused, Leyla. You need rest. We'll talk about this later. And with that, he left. I sat there, staring at the door he had just walked through, wondering if I had made a mistake. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. This wasn't going to be easy. Over the next few days, I started to notice the cracks. Omar avoided me, his words short and sharp when we did speak. My mother came to visit, clutching her prayer beads, reciting verses under her breath as if to protect herself from me. The whispers started, too. From the nurses, from the community, people asking questions, wondering what was wrong with me. But I didn't stop. I began to share my story with anyone who would listen. Some dismissed me outright. Others listened, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. And then something I didn't expect happened. A nurse, her name was Lena, came to me after one of her shifts. She sat by my bed, her hands trembling. What you said, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, about the fire, the faces. I've had dreams like that. for years, but I was too afraid to say anything. I reached out and took her hand. "You're not alone," I said. Lena started crying, and for the first time, I realized that my story wasn't just for me. It was for people like her, people who were searching, people who were scared but didn't know why. But not everyone was ready to hear it. When I told my sister, she burst into tears. "How can you say this?" she cried. "Do you know what this will do to our family?" I told her I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to help. She shook her head and left, slamming the door behind her. I won't lie to you. There were moments when I wanted to stop, when the weight of it all felt too much to bear. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered the screams. I remembered the faces of the people I saw in that place. Their eyes filled with terror, their hands reaching out for help that would never come. How could I stay silent? And then something incredible happened. One night, Omar came to me. His face was pale, his eyes red from crying. "I can't stop thinking about what you said," he admitted. "I keep hearing your voice, seeing the fire. I don't know what to believe anymore." I took his hand, tears streaming down my face. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," I told him. "But promise me you'll start asking the questions. Promise me you'll search for the truth." He nodded, and in that moment, I felt hope. But it wasn't just about Omar. This was bigger than him, bigger than me. It was about breaking the chains that had held us for so long. Chains of fear, of pride, of lies passed down for generations. Some people listened, others didn't. But every conversation, every question planted a seed. And I knew that one day those seeds would grow. What I learned is that the truth has a way of shining through, no matter how much darkness tries to hide it. And that's why I'm telling you this now, because this isn't just my story. It's a warning. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share next might be the most important thing you'll ever hear. The warning, the reality of eternity. I want to ask you something. What do you think happens when this life is over? Do you think it's just darkness, just an end? Or do you believe in something more? I thought I knew the answer. I thought my prayers, my good deeds, my devotion would lead me to paradise. I thought I was prepared, but I wasn't. What I saw, the flames, the screams, the faces of those who were lost, it wasn't just a dream or a warning for me. It was real. And it was a glimpse of what eternity can look like for those who choose the wrong path. You see, eternity isn't just a word, it's forever. No breaks, no second chances, no way out. The people I saw in that place were trapped. They weren't evil people, not in the way we think of evil. Many of them believed they were doing the right thing. They were kind, generous, and devout. But they had trusted in something that couldn't save them. Let me tell you what stood out the most. It wasn't the fire or the pain, though those were unbearable. It was the regret. The regret was everywhere. You could feel it in the air, hear it in their screams. They weren't just in agony because of where they were. They were in agony because they knew they didn't have to be there. They remembered the moments when they could have turned back, the questions they ignored, the truths they dismissed. And now it was too late. I don't want that to be your story. Ask yourself this. If today was your last day, are you ready? Are you sure of where you would go? I used to think I was sure. I thought my prayers and good works were enough. But standing in that place, looking at those faces, I realized the truth. It's not about what you do. It's about who you know. The figure in the light, the one who saved me, he wasn't just another prophet. He wasn't just a wise teacher or a good man. He was the way, the truth, and the life. Without him, there is no hope. Without him, there is no escape from that place. I need you to understand this. This isn't about fear or guilt. This is about eternity. I saw it, I felt it, and I can't stay silent about it, because one day you'll stand where I stood. You'll face the reality of what comes after this life. And when that day comes, you won't have time to change your mind. But you do have time right now. You have a choice. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share could change everything for you. It's not too late, but it's up to you to decide what happens next. Right now, you're watching this, and maybe you're feeling something. Maybe it's curiosity, maybe it's doubt, or maybe deep down, it's fear. I know that feeling. I know what it's like to sit there and wonder if everything you've believed could be wrong. To wonder if the life you're living is leading you to a place you never intended to go. But let me tell you this. You don't have to wonder. You don't have to guess. I didn't come back to scare you. I came back to warn you. Eternity is real. Heaven is real. Hell is real. And whether we like it or not, we are all heading toward one of them. The question is, where are you heading? I don't want you to go through what I saw. I don't want you to feel the flames, hear the screams, or carry the regret that so many souls are trapped with. But the truth is, the choice is yours. Right now, in this moment, you have a chance to change everything. You have a chance to choose the light, the truth, the one who can save you. I know it's not easy. I know it feels like a risk. But what's the bigger risk? Holding on to what you think you know, or letting go and finding out what's real? When I met him, the one who saved me, he didn't ask for perfection. He didn't ask for a lifetime of rituals or good deeds to prove myself. He asked for my heart. That's all he wants from you. So I'm asking you now, will you give him a chance? Will you open your heart and ask him to show you the truth? I can't make this decision for you. No one can. But I can tell you this. One day, we will all stand before him. And on that day, you won't be able to say you didn't know. You've heard my story. You've seen what I saw. The question is, what will you do with it? If you feel that pull, that small voice inside you telling you to act, don't ignore it. That's him calling you. That's his hand reaching out to you. Will you take it? This moment could change everything for you. It could change your eternity. Don't let it slip away. Thank you for listening to my story. If it has touched your heart, share it. Someone else might need to hear it too. And if you have questions, don't stay silent. Reach out. Ask. Because the truth is waiting for you, and he is waiting for you. Choose him. Choose life. Choose eternity.
You've heard the story. You've seen the warning. Now, the choice is yours. Will you take that step toward the truth? Will you choose the light over the darkness? If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Click like, hit subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments below, leave a prayer, whether for yourself, for someone you love, or for those still searching. Your engagement could be the key that helps someone else find their way. Thank you for watching, and remember, this moment could change everything.